Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Deb Kerr. I'm president at Intuit, the Center for Intuitive and Outsider Art. And I'm pleased today to have the third of our series in dialogue on Henry Darger. And today I'm welcoming my friend and artistic colleague, Jan Tichy. So Jan and I have worked together in the past, and it's so nice that you're actually here in person. This is the first of our webinars where my guests have been right here with me in the recreated Henry Darger room at Intuit. And just as a reminder, Intuit is getting ready to close. Our last day open to the public is Labor Day, September 4th. And then we are embarking on a very exciting building-wide renovation. We'll be tripling the museum's space, so we're really excited about that. And most of the furniture is no longer in the room. It's just you and me, the chandelier and the fireplace. We are going to be reimagining the Henry Darger room in a new way in the renovated museum. And we are hoping to open late summer of 2024. In the meantime, we'll be doing more online programs like this and programs at partner spaces around the city of Chicago. So with that, I'm going to say a little bit about you, Jan. You're a contemporary artist and educator. And I love this. You're working at the intersection of video, sculpture, architecture, and photography. But I know that you're also interested in visual art, in multimedia. So I don't really think that there are any boundaries to what interests you as an artist. I think that's really wonderful. You were born in Prague. You studied art early on in Israel, but then came to the School of the Art Institute in Chicago for your MFA. And you're now a professor in the Department of Photography and the Department of Art and Technology Studies. So in addition to gallery exhibitions, you've been doing large public art projects throughout the U.S. You're also thinking internationally these days. I'll ask you a little bit more about that. And in 2018, when we first met, that was when you were one of the Art on the MART's inaugural artists, exhibiting Artists in Horto. I say that correctly? Yep. 7 Gardens for Chicago, which included Henry Darger inspired imagery. And if you're not in Chicago and you don't know what Art on the MART is, the Chicago Merchandise Mart, which is one of the physically largest buildings in terms of square footage, and for a long time was the largest building in terms of square footage. And it has a big, broad side. And in 2018, the city of Chicago started projecting giant images on the side of this building at night. And it's really a spectacular canvas for images, don't you think?
Yeah, it's one of the largest digital canvases in the world. It's, as they like to say, it's the size of 2 football fields.
Yeah, that's a huge image size.
Yeah.
So how did you first become acquainted with the work of Henry Darger?
Well, as you said, I came to Chicago in 2007 for grad school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago on an invitation of Mary Jane Jacobs. And the first 2 years in Chicago, the grad school, it was a real introduction to the city for me. That's what I was interested in. And so I think that's where I first heard about Henry Darger. I was not familiar with him and his work prior to that. Though I know that he has been taught, for example, at the Academy in Jerusalem. I know professors that are teaching Henry as a part of their curriculum. But I came across his name and work only when coming to here. I think 2007-8 was also these years where, Henry Darger was for a long time out there, but I think these were the years of Vivian Meyer and Miroslav Tichy, who I bear the same family name and coming from the same place. And I think, around this time for me here in Chicago and at the School of the Art Institute, there was some type of understanding of outside art as a part of the artwork that we need to relate to as any part of the artwork. And I think that was really exciting about, like understanding this new way of navigating. And so I think that's when I sort of learned about Henry Darger. But I think I really, discovered him when I started to work on the Seven Gardens in 2018. And the idea for this project was Chicago has on its shield it says Herbs in Horto, the city in the garden. It was a way for the city founders to make sure that sort of hopefully forever we will be able to live in a city that also has its green parts. And it has not always been the case, but I think that throughout the history, mayors, aldermen, and Chicagoans were trying to create and recreate a sense of nature in the city. And
I think that the fact that the whole lakefront of the city is mostly protected in green space is a real tribute to that. It's one of the amazing things about
I think it's very much part of how we as Chicagoans understand, right? There are certain boundaries. There's the lakefront, there's the river, there are the parks, there are the boulevards. These are places that are really important to us. And if that's the case, I thought, well, that has to have an impact on artists, as it has on me, as an artist and educator living here. And so I started to look historically for artists that in some way we can see the nature sort of flowering, coming through their work. And then collecting this nature from these works of art, these were paintings, photographs, collages, like in the case of Henry, and then recreating sort of a new gardens on the facade of the MART. And so that's, I think, when I really started to, through people like you and Kyoko Lerner, to understand Henry's work better. Also, I think it was a way of connecting myself with him and this interconnections with the other artists, with these other seven gardens. I think something new was happening there, also in relationship to how one can understand Darger's work.
It's interesting that you first encountered Henry when you came here in 2007, 2008. 2008 is when this room was originally installed and opened. But, even to this day, we have people from Chicago who come to Intuit and are finding out about Henry for the very first time. We get people from around the world who come to Intuit as a destination because they want to have a bit of a Henry experience. But we have people who have never heard of him right here in Chicago. So there's a real dichotomy there around who knows about Henry Darger. We find that our guests are pretty evenly divided. Those who know and this is a destination, and those who come here find out about him and then go down the rabbit hole with us to learn more about Henry Darger. Yeah. What do you think that Henry and learning about Henry has influenced your own artistic practice in any way?
Yeah, I think that what I did for Art on the MART, I think I related to Henry's work, both in the sense of this theory of production, reproduction, that is something that comes from the writings of Lucia Moholy and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, but also Walter Benjamin. This idea how in an age of reproduction, how we are using these reproductive techniques for creative purposes. And Henry did something that on one hand, many children, right, copying, and I remember myself as a kid looking on different images that were coming to me through the words of storytelling, advertising, and in different ways, copying them, taking them, replacing their context, and through that saying something new. So I think, understanding Henry through that was huge, because it is different than the way that, let's say, Moholy-Nagy, that he also had one of his gardens based on this principle, is very different. So I think that had a huge impact on understanding of this theory.
And let me just comment on that a second, in case some people are less familiar. But Intuit owns a lot of his ephemera, his objects, including coloring book pages that he used. And so, if you look at this image of your work, giant sunflowers, giant roses, these are all the kinds of images that were found in Henry's work, but many of these were lifted from the coloring book pages that he owned, and he would take those coloring pages to the drugstore and have them sent off for photographic reproductions or enlargements or reductions. And I think that we're all familiar with the multiplicity of children, that, the same child over and over again appearing in that artwork, but the same thing happened with the gardens in Henry Darger's work. And one of the things, it's so interesting to me that these were projected on this giant MART 2 football fields size palette, and in many of the images, the sunflowers or the trees or the flowers are enormous compared to the size of the humans or the mythical creatures in Henry's work.
Yeah, I think that, and it was another step of exactly what he was doing, right? Like it's taking them, reproducing them, changing them as a part of the reproduction. Here it was the scale, here it was the notion of time.
And using that as part of the narrative of the
and I think that, I think that the narrative, both in my piece, but also in Henry's work, is such an important thing that is related, I think, and that's one of the things that I also think that had a real impact on me understanding the general notion of artistic practice, right? When we as artists we say things, right? It's the way that I understand art making is about communicating the things that are important to us. And when we talk about communication, that means we're talking to somebody. And in the case of Henry, the question of audience is
it's a mystery.
It's a mystery, and I think that's really interesting and also important for us as artists to think. When we think about who are we talking to, and how these things are being interpreted. When I'm thinking about it, that's something that sort of shifts the perspective, and people and work like Darger's can do that. I think that's another thing that was really important for me to understand, or try to be there with him, with these decisions that we as artists do every day.
Yeah, I really like that. We have actually had even college students come in, or college professors come in and say, I experience students who think that tracing isn't allowed. And one of our basic precepts here is that anyone can get creative. They don't have to have technical drawing and sculpting skills. That it's sort of, there's no limit. You can use whatever tools or processes are successful for you and that help you tell that narrative, that communicate what you want to communicate. Yeah, I like that. How about in your teaching practice? How has Henry played a role in your teaching practice?
This is a great segue because, right, like that's what, and today I think we are past these assumptions, how things are created. Things are open for us to find the best way to tell the stories that you're interested in. And I think that's one of the things that is important to talk with students. I'm not teaching Henry as a subject,
Sure.
but he always makes it in somewhere. Always, right? And it doesn't matter if it's an introduction to photography, as you said. He was using photography method copies to put this practice together. If it's about, I think another thing that many students, young people that are coming to art school, and start to think about themselves as an artist, trying to find themselves in this world, in this art world. Henry Darger worked from the margins. And I think this relationship between the margins and the center, I'm teaching in the School of the Art Institute, which, we see itself as a, important part of the art world here and elsewhere. And so what is the relationship to the margin? And what is the relationship of the margins toward the center? Because not everybody who's studying art is going to be an artist, is not going to be an exhibiting artist.
Right.
We, as a school, are educating and producing people that are, culturally educated, and their creative potential can open up in many different places. And I think, learning about Darger's practice and his life can open new perspectives of how we navigate this space. There are so many ways to be able to be creative and to share stories, even when like what we said earlier about the audience, right? It's a mystery for who this was. So I think this is really important for today's students as well.
I love that. I love that very much. Well, as you know, and as I mentioned before, Intuit is getting ready to do this major renovation. You and I have been talking a little bit about the new Darger room, and it will be an expanded exhibition. We hear from guests a lot that they want to see art, and although Intuit doesn't own the art, we always have great friends, fellow museums, and private citizens who own the art who will lend us the art. So we're going to be exhibiting the art, so letting people have that experience into the art and into the writings of Henry Darger. But then we also want to re-showcase the room and give people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how did Henry create this art in the best ways that we can research and find and try to sort that out, because we weren't there. But what would you like to see in a reimagined Henry Darger exhibition?
Right. I mean, I think it's so exciting to think about this, because that's the question about audience, right? That we are talking from the beginning. And so I think there's a certain freedom with thinking about audience in regards to the word that was not clearly planned for a certain audience, or we don't know. As we said, it's a mystery. And therefore the opening and that's, I feel like that, that was also for me the main challenge, how you put Darger's work on such a platform where suddenly thousands of people are exposed to it. That's why, for example, it was so important for me to create the website that we are seeing on the screen, for people to create another points of access, to learn about the work, to learn about the life. So I think that's great that this place can sort of open it to everybody. And what are the different ways that we are introducing Henry to schools that are coming here, to artists that are coming here, to ordinary Chicagoans that are looking to learn more about where they are. And so I think the new way that you're reimagining this place should try to figure out ways to everybody, to everybody around here. But also, as you said earlier when we talked, like people are learning and want to learn about Henry Darger's also that are not in Chicago.
Absolutely.
So how do we make it accessible also out there to the rest of the country, to the rest of the world? And so I think ways how to sort of extend the museum out there to all of these audiences would be interesting. And I think another thing that
let me comment on that.
Oh, sure.
Hang on to that. Hang on to the other thing. We, in planning for this exhibition in 2021, we did a whole series of changing exhibitions where we worked with Darger scholars, Michael Bonesteel, Mary Trent, Lisa Runquist, and others to help us tell more reliable stories about what were his inspirations and how did he do his work and what were the books he was reading. So we want to be able to incorporate some of those deeper dives. So just as you're saying, people at different levels, I teach museum management at Northwestern in their museum certificate program, and my co-teacher Jack Ledden always talks about skim, swim, or dive. So we want to be able to address people who are just learning about Henry for the first time and sort of the basic questions. But if someone comes in and they're a real Darger, fan, we want them to be able to dive deep and learn more. And we do want to make that available on our website. So even those 2021 exhibitions are on our website so that you can see those, you can see the labels, you can take a virtual tour through those exhibitions. And that's sometimes a little bit clunky. So we want to be able to figure out ways to take all of that good information we're pulling together. We even have a couple of beautiful catalogs that we did about some of the exhibitions that we've done about Henry in the past, and those are freely available to look at on our website. So it is important to me that we become a go-to place for people who want to learn more and do that deep dive and want to see more than the surface. I think sometimes when you just look at the surface, you're just looking through the artwork, and some of the artwork is pretty off-putting. Some of it with the beautiful gardens are just so beautiful and endearing, and some of it is really scary and horrific. And part of, I think, what I convey to people is that those are images from a story he is telling. They're part of the story he's telling, and that is a moment in time in the story, because each one of those artworks has a pretty elaborate caption attached to it where he is explaining where that fits in the story. Yeah. So what's your other thing?
Well, we talked earlier a little bit about what is the importance, or how do we tell the discovery story?
Yes.
With some of the artists that that are part of your mission, and I think that the story here is Nathan Lerner was an artist, was a designer.
Exactly.
And he was, the second director of the new Bauhaus here in Chicago. And these are extremely important parts of the story of for him to understand. And I think that's way more, interesting than the sort of the.
Oh, we just opened a trunk and found a book.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think these are really important thing. There is a story, and I think again it's a little bit different than the stories of David Meyer or Jan Tichy. There is a profound story of Kerr, both Nathan and Kyoko.
Yes,
and I think that this notion of care,
yes,
is something that you are carrying on. That's the root, right? Like caring, and I think it's such a big part of what museums and curators are doing today. We understand that curatorial is part about care.
Absolutely.
And so I think that is part of the story. And Yeah.
It is. It is. We wouldn't have Henry today if it weren't for Nathan and Kyoko Lerner so carefully stewarding the work and the relationship of Henry to the rest of the world, and making sure that he's viewed through this lens of let's do the research, let's learn about him, let's learn about the things that were influencing him, let's learn about the things that were interesting to him. This is a very sophisticated artist in many ways. In one of our exhibits that we did recently, Michael Bunsteel had done extensive research on Darger's writings, and we had a label that explained here are the books that Henry owned, and here are exact excerpts from Alice in Wonderland, Uncle Tom's Cabin, one of the Wizard of Oz books, exact one for one, exactly the same prose that Henry had lifted from these books, and he just changed the names of the main characters and maybe some of the adjectives, making them more dramatic. So I think that's fascinating stuff. And one of the things that I tell people a lot, because there's always these questions about gender transformation in Darger's work, and it's another mystery. But we do know that he owned the Wizard of Oz books, and in the second Wizard of Oz book, Tip is the main character, and Tip is this young boy, and he escapes from an evil sorceress, and he has adventures with the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and on. And at the end of the book, Glinda the Good Witch comes to him and says, Tip, you are under the sorceress's spell. You're really Princess Ozma of Oz, and I need to change you back into a girl. And I tell people this, and they're like, oh, yeah, there are gender transformation stories out there. There are stories in Catholic saints traditions, and Lisa Runquist has unearthed a lot of this around, common gender transformation stories that wove their way in a way into Henry's work.
Right. I think that, Michael's research is profound because it shows us that the way that Darger is working with images and text are the same. And so it allows us to think about them interconnectedly. When we think about images and how they're copied, pasted, and transformed, right? Mm-hmm. The transformation is crucial here because it leads to the possibility of transformation of characters and then transformation of gender and any fluidity within that.
There's all kinds of transformation in his work, right? There's the Blingans, the magical creatures, and in some of the paintings, they're young girls with their little horns just sprouting. There's the transformation. Some of the characters go from evil to good, and sometimes back again. So there's all this.
Yeah, and I do link it back to the reproduction, right? Mm. The reproduction, as you said, there are these, even physically we can see the lines of characters. And so I think when I was thinking how to make Darger's work accessible in such a public and huge platform, the question is, the flowers are also the characters, right? The question, is it the background or the flowers are also part of the transformation of all of these characters?
In some cases, we have the Blingans carrying giant stones, giant pink rocks. It's almost like those giant pink rocks are another character. Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see it all really part of the same practice. If it's image, if it's text, it's all reproductive and transformative.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to be transforming this space for sure. Just to clarify a little bit, we'll have a first floor introduction to the work, and then you'll go down the stairs to a second level of the exhibition. So it'll be much, much larger than we have now. and there will be the room and some further explanation about how Henry made his work. And now I'm going to just turn to, looks like we don't have a lot of questions in here yet, but I would love to turn to this, and please do ask us some more questions. Yes, we are recording, so we'll have the recording available on our website. Absolutely. Are there other questions for us? Okay. All right. And Lindsay, acting as Intuit, has put some of the links in that we've been talking about, the links to the exhibitions that we did in 2021, and I think also to Jan's Art on the MART installation website. So terrific. Okay. Yeah. Any questions for me?
Well, I think I had a couple in regards to the plays, so and I think you did answer them beautifully throughout the dialogue. You know, I'm really looking forward, you know, helping you bring this to all of these audiences.
I really appreciate that.
It's so exciting that there is support for this museum transformation, this possibility to be able to share Henry with much larger audiences that you were able to do so.
And I think that when we reopen the museum, there will be we hope to have a major announcement and splash here in the city and across the country, even because we know we have members and friends across the country and in Europe. One of the reasons we're doing this series at noontime is so that our European friends can join us, and people around the world can access the recordings. But as we were speaking earlier, two things are really important to me as we renovate and unveil a new museum. And one of those is accessibility and a safe and welcoming space for all. So no matter who you are, your background, color, orientation, physical abilities, mental abilities, we want this to be a safe space for everyone. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we are presenting these artists with the most reliable scholarship and research. A lot of our artists, the self-taught artists, weren't particularly well studied over the years. There are notable exceptions. Henry Darger is one that's been very well studied. The work that the Smithsonian has done on Bill Traylor, but we want to make sure that we are really telling authentic stories about our artists, and that we do a great job of making those stories as accessible and welcoming as possible. So that's exciting to me.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that we have been talking about is also how to allow the other direction of communication.
Absolutely.
How do we allow our audience to share with us and with the rest of the people? What do they know?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
exactly.
how we open the doors for additional knowledge that is not necessarily coming from scholars, but from ordinary Chicagoans that may have
Absolutely. We have people who come to visit the museum from places all over the country, around the world. And one of the first things they want to do is tell us about their encounter with this art or these artists. And those are amazing stories. So we need to be documenting those better. We've done some particular events where we've done that, but I'd love to be gathering those stories and hearing those tales, those experiences from the people who love this art and these artists in our museum.
Yeah, this is really important.
It is. So you and I are going to talk more about how we can collect those stories and make them part of the scholarship and make them available to other audiences. So people can say, oh, we heard from Jan who met this artist. Now I'd like to, maybe I should share my story as well so that it can snowball a bit. That would be great. Yeah. Yeah. I might occasionally hear from people. I love when I hear from people who met Henry. It's becoming fewer and far between. Okay. Any other questions? I don't think we have any other questions out there. All right. All right. Well, we have a few more minutes. Why don't I don't have a lot to share with you yet in terms of what the new space is going to look like, but I will show you just a couple of things. And a little sneak preview here. And here on the left, in true Chicago fashion, Intuit is actually 3 buildings. It's this building, which is 754 Milwaukee, this building, which is 756 Milwaukee, and then one on the back side, which is actually 735 Aberdeen, that faces the street behind us. But as we present to the public, we want this to look like a seamless one space museum. So we're going to be opening up the front in what was probably more like the historic facade, what it once was. These 2 buildings were built in the early 1870s. So the buildings are the front 2 buildings are 150 years old. And these are historic lintels over the windows that we'll be preserving. I know, right? Isn't that crazy? And then here is Milwaukee Avenue. This will be our new front door into the store and into the first section of the Darger exhibition. So this will be where we will have art. And then you will head down these stairs and go into a space that reveals the Darger room. And right now the plan is that the room itself will be larger than it is now. It'll actually be within this enclosed space, 75% of actual size. And I have a couple of other images to show. On the first floor, we're planning to show artwork and maybe even have an electronic table where you can scroll through all the images that Kyoko has provided to us, and then have some viewing stations here where you can get into more rich content, more detail around things like the discovery story. And downstairs, some wall wraps where you can see what the room looked like. And I love that Lisa Stone in the last in dialogue talked about the fact that the room may have been more messy when these photographs were taken, because I think, as you know, when you start to clean something up, you always make a mess first. And maybe as David Berglund, the neighbor who was helping Nathan Lerner with the cleanup initially, there might have been some additional chaos created beyond the fact that Henry was a known hoarder. We do know that. And so we have we're going to, back here in this space, have additional kiosks, video kiosks, where people can explore more in depth some of these themes that we've been talking about. Darger is an artist, author, scrapbook maker, his methods and materials, and then this room is a real Chicago treasure. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about for the room. So that's a little bit of a sneak preview. Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap up a little bit early. Jan, thank you. Oh no, before we do that, I want to hear about your upcoming projects. So you have, it's interesting that your connection to Henry also is a connection to Nathan Lerner and the new Bauhaus and Moholy-Nagy. Tell me a little bit about your upcoming projects.
Well, there are a couple that sort of, come out of here. I will be working with my students on a new work for the art in the MART.
Great.
So I think that's one thing that comes out of that research. Also, alongside the new Bauhaus, Nathan Lerner's archives at the Chicago Historic Museum is something that I'm working with 2 historians, sort of to make them more accessible to the public. So that's sort of a longer project. I'm working on a large exhibition in Europe, in Prague, and then later in Switzerland, and hopefully the third leg here in the United States. Exhibition of Lucia Moholy-Nagy's first wife, and who wrote with him Production Reproduction, an important photographer, documentarian, historian, and editor. And I will be participating in the upcoming Chicago Architecture Biennial, and working downtown on the Jeffrey Ballet building, not far from the Art on the MART. So this is.
You have some stuff going on.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Where in Switzerland will you be? Do you know yet?
It's a winter tour. The Fotostiftung Schweiz, the largest, sort of a photo collection in Switzerland. They are one of the largest holders of Lucia Zamaholi's work. So the work, the exhibition, Lucia Zamaholi Exposures, that will originate in Prague and Kunsthalle Praha, that commissioned the exhibition and works with us to create it. It will travel then to Switzerland and hopefully to the United States.
And part of the reason I ask is that the Collection de l'Art Brut in Lausanne is one of the largest holders of Henry Darger works. So if someone's planning a trip to Switzerland in the future, they could.
Yeah, and there, in Lausanne, there will be actually at that time, meaning the winter of 25, there will be another exhibition of Lucia Zamaholi. So we'll make sure to take the collection.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jan.
Thanks for having me.
It was great to have you. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to letting you know more about the renovated Intuit, the campaign, Just Imagine, to imagine a new Intuit, and details about events during the next year. Thank you so much. Thank you all.